Okay, Paul, I think we are live now and ready to jump into today's Power Talk. So very happy to sort of be able to have this talk today about security and privacy. And these are obviously two topics that are very dear to our heart and very much at the core of Power Diary. So great for us to be able to jump on and talk to everyone about this important topic today. And really, we're going to focus on the must-dos for health practices and a little bit about what Power Diary does in terms of managing security and compliance. So perhaps before we jump right into that, we might spend a couple of minutes introducing ourselves. So for those who don't know me, I'm Damien Adler. I'm one of the co-founders of Power Diary. I'm a registered psychologist in Australia and came to this space via operating practices and seeing a need for better ways to manage health practices and ways to make the administration component of health practices much more efficient. So that was many years ago, and having seen that need and not been able to find any sort of good products in the market, Paul and I, who we'll talk to in a second, Paul and I, who's my brother, decided that we would set up a company and really build a product that would meet the needs of health practitioners. So I'll hand over to Paul to introduce himself.
Sure. Thanks, Damien. I'm Paul Adler, and Damien and I are brothers. We co-founded Power Diary, and my role at Power Diary is the CTO. So I guess I'm sort of the end of the line of all things technology, and obviously that's a key part of that is security. But that's something that, and we'll share a bit more about it. But that's something that's a whole company-wide approach and a whole company-wide role that we have at Power Diary. But prior to co-founding Power Diary with Damien, I founded a technology consulting company, and we went and we helped small businesses. We were an Australian company. We helped small businesses across Australia, many tens of thousands of businesses, help them navigate and the sort of minefield of technology, help them utilize technology better, help them with security, help them make good choices with to be able to use technology and get the most out of technology in their businesses.
Very good, and that sort of was a good the combination of that experience that you had, Paul, and then where I was coming from a health practitioner point of view, I think was been a good combination in terms of working out. Putting those two sets of experiences together to develop a product that I guess brought technology and security together with operation of a health practice. And looking at what we're going to cover today, I think
that was 10 or 11 years ago now, I think so.
Exactly.
The years keep creeping up, but it was 11 years ago when we co-founded it.
We always sometimes forget, don't we? How long exactly has it been? It's been a lot of years in working in this space and evolving, the product along with the offerings and the needs that people have. So I think it's a good sign that it's gone quickly, I think.
Indeed, yeah.
So in terms of the things we're going to talk about today, and I think you made a good point about that. Whilst you're the CTO, it's a sort of company-wide approach to security. And I think it really ties into what we're going to talk about today, because we'll certainly talk about some of the technical aspects of what we do at Power Diary and how we manage security. But we're also going to talk about the broader role of the team. So whether it's your practice manager, whether it's your clinicians, whether it's anyone with sort of access to any kind of confidential data, we need to be thinking kind of much more broadly about security, because it's, people often think, when we talk about security, they go straight to the idea of some sort of, sophisticated hacking group that is trying to, hack into a system. That certainly can happen, and that's something that we are very mindful of. But thinking about security and privacy is much broader than that and goes beyond just that kind of the technical things that we do to make sure that data is secure and locked down. So we're going to talk about that today and about what you can do in your practice to really hone in on security and make sure that you're covering off on all the things that are going to make a difference. So in looking at this, we've got a section on why security, why now, how we approach things, and the most secure ways that you can use Power Diary, and then of course some critical measures you can do that you can have in place in your practice that is going to make a difference.
Yeah,
so
we're going to share some sort of tips and some ideas and the really practical things that you can do that you don't need to be a sort of an expert. You don't need to spend a lot of money on, or in fact, often any money, but things that will really improve the security posture, really improve the overall security at your practice.
Yeah, and and it's often those things too, aren't they? Sometimes the easy things that people just they never think of or don't they don't pay attention to, and that can be the thing that is the difference between a practice that's secure and never has an issue and one that runs into trouble.
Yeah, and I mean awareness, and we will mention this later, but awareness is a critical step and a really important first step, and simply by attending this seminar or other seminars like it, webinars like it, that you're taking a really important key step to improving security by becoming more aware of the nature, the different types of threats and the different sorts of things that you can do to improve your to lower the risk, improve make your practice more secure and make you much less likely to have any sort of data breach or security incident.
Yeah. And interestingly, we comply with, and we sometimes get audited in different circumstances around our security posture as a company. And again, what's interesting is that the different security frameworks and the different sorts of audits that we do, they always have this awareness and education element as a key component. So yes, they'll cover off on the technical and the encryption and all the different sort of things that we do that might more easily come to mind. But that idea of education awareness is 100% there every time. There is an element of that is front and center, that, hey, you can have all that, but if your team is not aware and if you're not attending to the basics, then the rest really becomes much less effective. So in terms of the sort of security, why now? It's really because of this idea of this obvious and not so obvious aspects of security, and that's really what we wanted to sort of raise awareness about today. Security certainly is never something that you can say is done. You can be up to date, you can have your training up to date, you can be using all the latest. But as soon as that is the moment that you think that it is done and up to date, then tomorrow things change. And this is the thing, that there is, the nature of technology anyway is something that constantly changes. But we really need to adjust the mindset and to be sort of thinking about security and privacy related matters as something that's a day-to-day thing to be thinking about. And to be making sure that we sort of stay up to date. And as you know, if you look at any kind of news, there's always content about the sorts of things that people try and different things that people attempt to, what we call like bad actors. So people who are trying to gain access to information that they shouldn't. And they evolve their efforts constantly, and that means that when you're responsible for looking after protected, and sensitive information, then, but also everyone that's sort of managing any form of confidential information needs to be vigilant and keeping things kind of up to date. Also, the idea of thinking about, insider threats and again, this is an area that often gets neglected, but we need to be thinking about not just someone external perhaps trying to access information, but some of the things that can happen internally as well. So there can be deliberate and accidental things that can happen. Additionally, when we're thinking about security, we're not just thinking about just access. And we've got a couple of points here that, just to kind of really draw attention to, that we've got to think about the security of data, and particularly with health data. It comes into this idea of availability of data as well. So, how robust the system is so that health information can be accessed at all times and not going to get lost by an incident. So, when we think about the ways in which data can be lost, fires and floods, and if people have their data stored, locally, which used to happen, right? When we started Power Diary, and we were, built it in the cloud. Most of the competing systems at that time were on-premises systems, so all the data was stored, in someone's practice. Their backups were stored there, too. And when, if there was a fire or a theft or something happened, that data, was lost. So, when we're thinking about security, it's around that, making sure that that is available. Access, so things like user permissions and being able to see what people are doing in a system. Of course, we've got hacking and denial of service attacks, which tend to get a fair bit of media attention, so front of mind. And then there are other security concerns, where we think about phishing, where people send essentially spam, emails or spam communications, trying to get people to reveal login information. And other concerns, of course, are things like data theft, sabotage, and ransomware, which has affected some large institutions, globally in the last sort of 5 years or so, where people have, managed to get, lock up data and prevent people from accessing it. And so when we're thinking about security as a company, and when we're trying to evaluate and assess what we're doing, we're thinking about all these different sort of elements to security, not just the actual, can a system be penetrated or someone external gain access, but we need to think about it kind of globally. And that's the way, when you're thinking about it in your individual practice, it's to sort of broaden that idea of thinking about security to not just the technical, but to these other sorts of things that can happen. Okay, so
I think like people often they jump to like, oh, is everything encrypted? And of course our answer is yes, but that's sort of like, it's an important step, but it's by no means enough at all. And of course, Power Diary encrypts everything, all of your data at rest and at every step of the way. And we'll explain a little bit more about that later. But we do cover off all those sort of things, but there's a lot more to it. And the way I like this sort of, we have an analogy that we use, and I think about it like a house, locking up your house with all of your doors and your windows. There's multiple entries into your house, and when you go out, we don't just lock the front door and ignore everything else. We go out, we don't lock the front door and leave the garage door wide open, for example, or leave all of our windows wide open. And it's the same thing it's the same same idea that we need to do when we need to think about with security. We need to make sure that we've locked everything, that we have locked our front door, that our garage is locked, and that our windows are locked. And this is what I like about this way to think about security. There are some parts that are more important than others. So our front door, our garage, and all of our lower floor windows, for example, they're a lot more important than some of the other, perhaps, upper story windows, for example, in this particular picture. So, there are sort of some more important, parts of security that you should address and that you should deal with as a higher priority. And you'll get a lot of improvement in your security by focusing on those things, some super critical ones. And of course, you're only like as weak as your, as strong as your weakest link. But yeah, there are some really important measures that you can take and that you should take, and that will improve your security greatly.
Yeah, and I think on this sort of, on this analogy, the thing that people often don't understand, and I think we were talking about this just the other day, you and I, about the percentage of attacks that are automated, where people are looking for, there isn't someone individually targeting a business, but they're using software to sort of look at general vulnerabilities. So essentially the equivalent with the houses that they're not necessarily, targeting a particular house and trying every possible way, but they might be driving around the street to see who's got their front door wide open, right? And so if people have their front door wide open, and the equivalent of security term for our stuff might be that they're using the same username and password, or the same username and password for all the different programs that they access. They don't have, a automated system can then go around and test that username and password that they might have got from somewhere else, and apply that to see if someone got sloppy security and how they're managing their own personal logins. And so often it's really about attending to those basics, are things like making sure that you're not an appealing target and getting picked up by automated systems that sort of identify a weakness, which then allows more focused exploitation. So it's something that again, we don't sort of typically don't think about routinely.
Even some of the really big famous hacks that have happened in globally are happened because of just simple little things. They weren't really complex hacks and big security teams that sort of breach something. They were just simple mistakes that people made, and then people were able to like hackers were able to access a whole lot of data, sensitive data. So certainly keeping on, like dealing with the small little obvious things which we're going to share, that will make a massive improvement to your security.
And that sort of prevents, like statistically speaking, the majority of these things. It's interesting that I think when the media report things, right, it's often it's always like hackers, right? They said the term, and it evokes this image of these kind of people in a dark room with lots of screens and doing this high tech kind of stuff.
Green text coming up.
That's right. That's right. I don't know why it's always green, but it is, isn't it?
Yes.
But those images that we get from from media and from movies and pop culture, but the stark reality is much more boring than that, right? It's people forgetting to do, or just not being aware of the basics, and that's how that's where people become
not keeping their computers up to date and updating the updating the operating system, having antivirus on there. Just simple little things like that will improve. And someone discovered a vulnerability in a Windows or Apple, iOS, whatever, then the vendor fixed it, Microsoft or Apple fixed it. But if you haven't updated, well, you don't have that fixed, and you are open to that. You are open to the automated exploit. There like some little tool that some hacker did create that then just goes and quickly tests. Who has not patched? Who is open still? Who has their door open? Who has this door wide open on their computer that we can come in?
Yeah. And I think maybe people don't necessarily understand the extent to which, like a lot of those updates that they get pushed out, how many of them actually contain security fixes. Because it's they might be a recommended update, or Windows or whoever it might be says, hey, should apply this, but they don't also necessarily broadcast it too broadly about the extent to which that needs to be, or the extent to which it contains fixes to security, because not necessarily good for their image. But a lot of those, if you look at them and you'll see like release notes, you can click on and you'll often see it's a security fix. And as you were saying, if you don't have that there, and you're visiting websites and so forth with an outdated version of your browser, for instance, that version has a known vulnerability. Well, now you're actually broadcasting that, hey, I'm using an out-of-date, insecure version of this system. It'd be kind of like advertising on your front door that your lock can be opened with a screwdriver, right? Your faulty lock that everyone knows about, right? And putting a big sign on saying, hey, I haven't changed my lock yet, right? This one is one that can be opened with a screwdriver, right? and then it invites the odds
People driving past.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, out of all those houses, no, they're secure, they're secure. Oh, that one's got the big sticker on it saying that one can be easily accessed. Bang. And that becomes the focus of attention. So, definitely any of these sort of, whether it's an operating system update or, using the current version of that browser, critically, important to do. And we often, we build PowerDiary to comply with the sort of the highest level of security, and with that, we want people, of course, using it on the latest versions of browsers, and it's why we don't try and make backwards compatibility for too far back, because the content that we've got on people are storing on PowerDiary, it needs to use the current, most up-to-date security tools available. So that's how it works. Now, so with in terms of our own compliance and the sorts of things that inform our sort of security approach, we operate across multiple markets. So, we're operating around the world, and what we do, because we're not going to have like a different security in different kind of areas. So what we do is we look at globally what is the strictest requirements, whether it's a regulation or there's particular best practices in certain areas as well. And what we do is pick out the most strict sort of version of the requirements, and then we build PowerDiary to that. So, for instance, when we launched our telehealth feature in PowerDiary, so to provide that free to everyone, it was interesting. Different areas had different regulations in relation to what was acceptable for telehealth, but we looked at what is the strictest set of requirements that we can find anywhere, and then made sure that the technology that we used, and we built it in-house, so we weren't relying on sort of third-party servers and things to stream any content. We're like, what is the strictest version of this that we can kind of build? And then once we do that, we know then that we are covering compliance in the other jurisdictions, and so that's kind of very much at the heart of what we do is to constantly be looking at this, and we have full-time team members on this. This alone is looking at our compliance and looking at the rules and how this operates. And so that's kind of how we just listed there just some of the regulations that inform our security stance and how we assess, and often how we are assessed when we've got different, sometimes governments who are looking to use us or something will run through and assess our security and assess our compliance against the relevant acts and regulations and frameworks. And that's we want to always make sure that we're up to date with that, and we're attending to everything that needs to be attended to. So when we're looking at lots of questions we get, and we often get a range of different things, but how is data access controlled, and what measures do we have in place, and does PowerDiary adhere to this standard or that standard, what sort of backups, whether cloud or installed software, so cloud-based, so we access it from a website, versus locally installed software on your computer in your actual practice. Which of those are more more secure? We get lots of questions about telehealth, and obviously that all happened very fast, so some people were jumping onto systems that really weren't compliant, and they got a bit of a fright. So when they moved over to PowerDiary, we were able to sort of assure that, hey, this is how we build it and how we comply. But we get lots of questions, and we really welcome questions around security and privacy, because I think it's very healthy for the the industry to be thinking about these things and constantly asking questions of their vendors around these sorts of things. So it's it's very encouraging to see that, and it's one of the reasons that we thought it'd be good to jump on and talk about this. So we will now talk a bit about, and Paul will lead this discussion. I think this is over to you, Paul, but about what we kind of do.
Yeah. So and just on the previous slide around all the different security frameworks and policies and whatnot that we adhere to. We have a whole system, a computer system, it's a cloud-based system that tracks our adherence to those, like it tracks all of our internal policies and procedures. It tracks our adherence to those. It tracks our compliance with that. So it collects data automatically from our system. So, for example, we say everything's encrypted, but this system that we use, that's like to say everything's encrypted. That's we say it. But when we're audited, well, we need to prove it and we need to show it. And so we have a whole system, which happy to share more information perhaps separately, about that. It's quite a complex system, but it actually, all of our policies are in there, and then they're all tracked back to all these different security and compliance programs, and all of the data for the various audits and whatnot that happen. That's all collected and managed and stored in there. So it's quite security at Power Diary is something that it's really at the core of what we do. It sort of governs everything that we think about with new features, with everything that we do, like the operating systems, the infrastructure, the data storage, the way we go about our code, the way we go about changing our code, for example, the way we vet and approve people and the sort of access that they get. It's all it's something that we think about a lot. These are not just sort of idle words or policies that sit away in some sort of Word document. We have a whole system that we use which manages all of that.
And it's what's really cool about that too is that each area and each framework has broken down the different policies, procedures, and then these evidence tasks to demonstrate how we comply with that. And all of it is time limited too. So if we attach an evidence task to say, okay, here's our current evidence of compliance with these security standards, depending on the standard, that might be valid for say 3 months, and then bang, that one turns red and says that needs to be rechecked and revalidated. So there's a constant, it can never kind of go stale, or we can't sort of just have a period of time where you focus on it and leave it. It actually keeps a very active monitoring in real time of day-to-day compliance with each of those, and then establishes an evidence trail for us to use. The other thing that's really cool about that system that we use,
we'll share the name. It's a tool called Tugboat, and it's expensive. It's not sort of geared at it's not really intended for use. It's intended for use by organizations like Power Diary. It's complex and it's a big beast, but it's fantastic. And it enables us to be very confident, to have a good sort of awareness about our security posture.
Yeah, and be able to prove it when we need to. So that's good too. It
Exactly.
makes it very easy to be able to print off, and say, okay, here it is, bang, and it produces a report with everything on it. And the other thing that Tugboat does for us, which I really find useful, is that they are constantly looking at the detail and any changes that might happen. And so we've sort of got like an alert, if you like, and a watch on all the different regions that we operate. And so if there's a local rule change that occurs, then that gets picked up. It kind of flags if there's any kind of inconsistency between our, the existing and the new requirements. And that gives us time then to update, our, whatever it might need to be, to make sure by the time that in that particular region or that particular set of regulations that change, we can kind of have those changes implemented, prior to, so we're not prior to it becoming a requirement, and so that we're not sort of acting reactively, or worse, sort of overlooking something altogether that might change. And that's it's been something that we didn't have that.
We like it.
We like it. It's very
It's
interesting.
not a sexy, it's not a sort of sexy sort of topic, but it's really important, and it's something that we don't just pay lip service to it or just talk about it. It's something that we think it's great. We think this tool is great, and it helps us to really be effective, and confident, and to know where we're sitting with our technology and with our security and with our compliance with various programs. Look, I thought I'd just sort of maybe just share, and I won't sort of dwell on this too much, but just give some high level overview of some of the different measures. This is not an exhaustive list, but some of the different measures that we have in place here at PowerDiary. So at the sort of, I guess at the infrastructure level, we utilize Amazon AWS. So everything, we utilize all of their, they have a whole sort of infrastructure environment for organizations, large organizations, and it's used by the largest businesses in the world, and it's a fantastic way to provide infrastructure securely to run applications like PowerDiary, instead of just having it sitting on a couple of servers or who knows where. Amazon provide a really good and really a brilliant system for hosting and storing data securely. So at PowerDiary, and the way we use Amazon, we we make sure that the data is all split into different locations, spread across multiple data centers, so that we're not sort of likely to be impacted by an event that might happen in one area. The other thing that we do with our infrastructure is that we configure our systems with, we don't just sort of say, oh, we're going to set up a server in a particular way and give it our best shot that we think is a good way. We actually apply automated best practice processes that are done by their a framework set up by the US Department of Defense, and there's sort of a low level of security, a medium level, and a top level, and we use the highest level of security framework available that locks down the systems to a really high degree, and that makes sure that it gives our infrastructure, it means that our infrastructure is configured in the best possible way. And it's not just something that, PowerDiary, it's not just an idea or a concept that PowerDiary's come up with. This is internationally recognized best practice for how to configure precisely the infrastructure that we use. Precisely, it's not just sort of a general guideline. This is exactly, so to think about it at a computer, it would be like, precise ways of turning things on or off, or just say uninstalling this if you're thinking about it as a, your own PC. Uninstall these things because you're using Windows X, Windows 220, whatever it is, Windows 11. Please make sure you uninstall these things, change these settings, do all these sorts of, make all these modifications to it in order to be really, really, really secure. So we utilize this program, this sort of framework developed by the Department of Defense, and it means that our systems are configured according to best practices. Now, I guess sort of on our systems more broadly, we've got various types of firewalls that look at user behavior, the source of the traffic, they're trying to, we've never had any sort of denial of service or anything like that, but we have systems in place that are watching and are ready to intervene in the event that something unusual is detected. Damien mentioned before about the availability of data. So obviously we've got lots of redundancy and things, but at the end of the day, it's backups are important, and we do various different types of backups that are done throughout the day. And we have a sort of an automated process which tests the backup by doing a complete restore every day and validates that our backup works and is effective, and by doing a complete restore and then an automated test of that. We
would
have,
you say, Paul, sorry, just on that, would you say, so people that are using on-premises software, and so they sometimes will say, I take the system, I take a daily backup, right? And I suppose drawing on your time from when you were running, a company supporting thousands of businesses that might have been doing those processes, what sort of problems would you see with that when people, how does that sort of contrast with the way, like that step that you were talking about that we do?
Yeah, I think we would see, in this business that I started and ran, we would see, countless examples where people have been, diligently doing their backups.
Yeah.
But because it was never tested, and testing is not easy, but because it was never tested, no one knew whether or not it was working or not. And the only time, the time when you are first trying it out is when it absolutely has to work, because a hard drive has failed. A physical piece of device, physical piece of hardware has failed, and now the only way to get it back is via this backup, and the backup has to work. And so many times it doesn't work, many times, and there's often nothing that can be done in that case. And so it's so important to back up data. And then that's obviously goes without saying. You've got to have it off site so that if place burns down or flooded or robbed or whatever, and you've got to have it. So you've got to have it off site, and then you've got to test it to make sure that it is actually working. Yeah,
and so I think that's a difference sometimes between when people think about cloud-based versus having software locally installed, that things like that are difficult to do and time consuming to do. A system like Power Diary, we do it, right? Because it's part of our core work to do. Whereas so often, like it's very difficult for people running local software. Like, how many people have a backup of their laptop and testing that every day? No one typically has that. So it's a sort of being able to leverage then the sort of the technology that we can utilize to make
that you
sure
can't
things like
justify as a small business. You just can't. You can't afford to do it. You can't hire the right people anyway to set that up in the first place, to maintain it, to check it. Like the systems are too complicated to do it properly. And so like a businesses like Power Diary, where they're where we're managing things in a proper, professional, scalable way, it gives you the best chance, in my opinion, the best chance of making sure your data is secure and available. And those, you can access it when again, on people running stuff on servers, on their own servers or on their own PCs, that stuff just can die easily. And whereas say with people like organizations like Power Diary, our stuff's running on many servers, and those servers are automatically configured and scale up and down and whatnot throughout as demand increases or decreases. So if there's sort of an incident with a server, no one notices it. It's not something that impacts data or even impacts performance or availability or anything. But that takes engineering skill and time and investment to set that up. Power Diary has made those investments, and people benefit from it. We of course we have encryption at every step, whether that be in transit, at rest, all the backups, etc. The data's all encrypted with strong passwords. it's not possible for people at, for example, at our data center at Amazon, it's not possible for them, to access the data in any way or at any step or any of those backups or anything. It's physically, it's not possible. And on that, talk in terms of encryption, for example, like, the data that's like that we encrypt, like, for example, your passwords and things like that, those are encrypted. It is not possible for us to see or find or your password. Like, it is encrypted. It cannot be decrypted.
Yeah,
it is super secure. And I will talk a bit about passwords later, because that's not the same everywhere.
Yeah,
right. Like, it is physically, even with the most access and the most knowledge about Power Diary and possible, it is not possible to see that data. I can guarantee it. To see those passwords, and but that is not the case at every single organization, and that is why I'll talk about it later. But that's why it's super important that you use different passwords. Do not use the same password, on your, I'm not going to name names, but do not share passwords, because you don't know how well or otherwise they are. What their data practices are like, what their hygiene is like, what their security and storage is like. So I guess sort of some of the other things, and I'll sort of I'll just move through, but we've got lots of like automated alerting and monitoring for anything that's unusual, that is sort of out of the sort of normal sort of thresholds. We have an audit trail of all modifications that are made to anything, so that whether that be code, whether that be the configuration of systems, it is audited. There's an audit trail of it. There's a log, and everybody knows that. There's a log in there that we can, that's maintained, and it's automatically. You can't turn the log off, and it's monitoring and tracking everything that's done. The other thing that we do, is that we have a third-party company that tests Power Diary for vulnerabilities. So it goes through and it's checking the moment a new vulnerability is found in a particular piece of software or anything. They don't know anything about our setup, but what they are doing is the moment, say, there's some deficiency found in, some operating system or whatever, they go and they run and check to see whether or not we're vulnerable to that. And that happens automatically. It happens multiple times a day. We get notifications about, okay, we checked for this vulnerability. This new vulnerability was discovered, globally. Someone reported it. It was discovered, and we've gone and we've checked and tested your setup, your environment. We've tested Power Diary, and you're fine. You pass.
Which is great, because we'll get those alerts sometimes that it's been checked and passed before it even hits the news cycle. So when something, you wake up in the morning, you see the front page, some major issue. Like
WannaCry, those, various sort of, script attacks and things that was a recent, famous one. It was, our systems were automatically tested and validated that, we are not vulnerable to that. I guess, just sort of, other sort of security things around, making sure that our code, every bit of code is reviewed by, the team and signed off by management before it's able to be deployed into production. Our development teams, they all work with no access to any real data at all. They have 100%. It's a local test data, dummy data that they've created themselves. They have no access to real information. And of course, people. We have a security vetting process with police checks. We use two-factor authentication. That's something super important. on every single Power Diary system utilizes two-factor authentication. And we maintain, we insist and require strong passwords that are regularly changed.
That kind of keeps the whole, it means that we're not sort of overlooking those elements, and they're sort of built back into even all our policies and procedures in Tugboat that we're talking about, that kind of make sure that we, when someone new onboards with us, that they go through all of these things, and we can't get the green tick to say compliant without attending to each of those.
Correct.
Which is great. Okay, so looking at if we're looking at how people use Power Diary, what sort of things would you say people need to be kind of thinking about in how they use it and making use of this stuff? It's all good and well, I guess, if we've got technically that's really secure, but any comments here about what people should be focusing on when they're using this system?
So these are some things specifically about your use of Power Diary that we just really highly recommend that you do. And these are not just things related specifically to Power Diary. They're any system that with data in there that you value. It's really important that you do use unique accounts. Like, don't share user accounts. If you ever find yourself needing to give out your password to somebody else, like alarm bells should ring. Don't give out your password. And I guess that brings into the next point around using like strong and unique passwords. And we really recommend people using a password manager, and I'll talk about that just a little bit later. But a password manager stores passwords for you, and it'll generate long, very long, very random, very hard to guess passwords. And so for all of my, all the different applications that I use, I utilize a password manager, and it generates long passwords. It generates unique passwords, and I don't even know what they are because I literally don't see them. And a good password manager, you let it generate the password for you, and then and so like I do not know what all my passwords are because they're in my password manager. And they're very long, they're 20, 30, 40 characters long, with all the different options in them, the uppercase, lowercase, etc., etc. They're very long and they're unique. And the reason why it's unique is so important is that if you use the same password in, say, some online shopping site, for example, and use the same password there as you do for some important system like Power Diary, and that online shopping site gets hacked, then if they get hacked and the online shopping site happens to store the passwords in a way in which they can be read, then there's a risk there. It's a small risk, that have to know that you also use Power Diary and know your username and things as well. But by using unique passwords and by starting with really important accounts like your email, like Power Diary, starting with really important ones and start using a password that's only ever used there and never used anywhere else, that will help. So that even if you do, the online shoe retailer gets hacked and they find your password, they won't get into your email, they won't get into into Power Diary. And the other point as well is, I know it's annoying, but two-factor authentication helps dramatically. And the reason it helps is that if your computer is stolen and someone's got access, sitting in front of your computer, then they're not going to be able to log in, because you need another device. You need your phone in order to generate a token that gets put in. So using a unique password that's strong and using two-factor authentication, if your computer's stolen, people are not, if someone was able to be sitting in front of your computer ready to log in, they're not going to be able to get in.
And it also offers protection right against keystroke trackers and things like that. So if someone ends up with a keystroke tracker, so it's tracking the what you're entering into your keyboard, and therefore they get a hold of your password. If you're using two-factor authentication, they could have your username and your password, but when they go to try and log in, it's going to ask for the second factor. So on a separate device, bang, they don't have it, and they're gone. They won't be able to access. But without that, then, and someone ends up with a keystroke tracker, then people will be able to access, anything that where, that tracker was working when they entered usernames and passwords. So it's something that, like you say, like, it is annoying. We know it's annoying.
Yeah.
But in Powder, if you go into use it, you can, you want people to use that and turn it on, and so
it is something that governments are telling us, government organizations are telling us that, and we will progressively be ramping up the requirement to use two-factor authentication in Power Diary over the coming years or months. We'll see more use of or requirement to use two. If you want to access certain areas of the system, you'll have to use two-factor authentication. The other things as well around limiting user access, permissions, using privacy modes, and limiting what people can see, and making sure they've only got just enough access, just what they need. The using privacy mode, if your screen can ever be seen, turning the privacy mode on to quickly hide the names of any patients that is on the on the schedule. Also using a screensaver and making sure that you need to enter your password to get rid of the screensaver. That's a really important measure, so that if your computer is stolen, or if you happen to just quickly walk away, let that screensaver, set that screensaver. I have mine. Mine comes on a few minutes after I'm away, and I've got to key my password in to unlock it. And it's a bit annoying, but it does. If someone steals my machine, or if I walk away, then you need to have my password in order to be able to get into my computer. So checking users, making sure that, like, any people that have left, that they're deactivated or they're removed. Whenever you are in there adding a new user, that's a great time to run your eye down the list of them and do a check. Is there anybody that doesn't need to be here, or that has too many, or doesn't need these perhaps elevated permissions? Anyone that we can sort of is everything right? And the other thing as well is logs. So in Power Diary, we've got a logging system. I'm quite a big believer in logs. And in Power Diary, we've got a log that tracks everybody's user activity, and many people are aware of it. If you've not, it's something that's quite useful, because it is tracking exactly what everybody does in Power Diary. Who made the appointment, who moved the appointment, who cancelled the appointment, every single step of the way. It's who viewed this, who edited that. You can see. So something that's there, like, for the obvious sort of use of that to to sort of identify who booked that appointment or whatever. But it's got an important security role, because it's also going to tell anything about any unauthorized sort of surprise access, or when did someone log in, at what time, things like that. And what their IP address was. And
I was just going to say the IP address, exactly. And so even if someone was to get hold of a colleague's username and password and log in from an IP address that is traceable to them, it still provides that audit trail. Okay, so we might we're at the time, Paul. We might just jump into now what people can do that might be kind of outside of the kind of just the Power environment, and look at some of the more kind of broad things that people might do.
Yeah. So we've mentioned, we have touched on quite a few of these things, but keeping your operating system up to date. So whenever you get those updates, the request for, there's a new version for your browser, there's a new version for your, operating system on your phone, as well as your your PC, please update. It's such a simple measure, but included in those updates will be countless small little security fixes.
Mm-hmm.
Have some antivirus software on there. There are antivirus software that is built into the operating systems. They're fine to use. They're better than nothing. There's there's a million different opinions about this here, but even if that's what you utilize, then that's going to go 90% of the way to closing off that virus doorway. Use two-factor authentication if it's available. It's available in Power Diary. We recommend using it. Use different passwords for every account. Use a password manager. So I use LastPass, and it syncs up on it syncs different devices. It's you have what you have is you just have to remember one password to access LastPass, and from that you can get into your other passwords. And this is recognized best practice as to how to secure how to use passwords effectively. And that will take care of having long passwords. It'll make sure that you've got unique passwords. It'll even in fact tell you, hey, you've got this password, you're sharing this password across different accounts. We recommend changing it. Use with the screensaver, or make sure that to access your phone or to access the computer, that there's screensavers on there that you need to, whether that be Face ID on an iPhone or a PIN code. You need to, there's some sort of code that is needed to be able to access that device. Mm-hmm. The other one. This one sort of, inside clinics, restricting the ability to install software. That's something that's really reasonably simple measure to take. And, you do that by creating a new user that has, basic guest, like it may have just guest access. And then that's the account that people use to log into that computer. So but restricting that ability will help improve the security of that device. Restrict the ability to install software.
And mainly, Paul, just so they can't, the reason behind that is so that they can't download and install an insecure program to that device, which then might give control of that device to a third party. And that device has access to perhaps your network. It has access to all sorts of things, perhaps within your physical clinic environment. So, by preventing that, that's why that results in improved security, right? It means that you're really closing off you're locking one of the doors.
That's right. Yeah. With the environment, one of the key things, if you've got any devices that are in public sort of view or access, lock it to the desk so that it can't be simply lifted, like a reception. What sort of measures have you taken, Damien?
Yeah, look, what
have you seen?
We say in our clinic, we have a reception computer that is there. It is physically chained using a purpose built product to the desk. And the only way you're getting that computer out the door is if you take the desk with it, and that desk is huge, right? We actually built it in there. It's not going anywhere, right? So unless you're dragging that out with you, that computer is staying there. And that's very simply for that reason, that you, by having, that physically there, otherwise a simple thing like that, people could walk out, and if they did it straight after and the screen saver hadn't kicked in, now they've got access to a device that's got who knows what on it, and maybe logged into lots of different systems that you use. And on top of that, just while we're on that, I know we're very short on time, but you can also get products that you install onto devices, which I know we have on lots of our devices, that if a computer is stolen remotely, you can burn the computer. Wipe it completely, so it just fries the drive and it's done, and all data is removed. So if there is a particular concern you have, or you're dealing with highly sensitive stuff, you can install programs that allow you to remotely destroy what's on that drive.
And if people wanted more information about those measures that we take, then yeah, by all means, please, contact us. We'll be happy to share specific names of the products we use.
Yeah.
I guess sort of just like one of the other things as well, it's just really important with people to talk about security with the team and to have regular conversations about it, and to have open discussions around, where are our risks, what would be the impact of a data breach or data loss, where do they sort of see, is our do we have any network ports in public areas? Are there any things that people know that perhaps sort of we're not as secure or as good as we could be? So having those conversations and getting the team's input, and bringing their, raising the awareness about it, and sort of keeping it top of mind. It's really, oh yeah, hey, I've been seeing an alert pop up on my computer. What does that mean? That my antivirus is out of date. I thought it should update automatically, for example. So having those discussions will, help make sure that people are just aware of it, and then you bring it to, it's brought to, any issues are brought to your attention, as a sort of an owner or practice manager, and then then you can deal with it.
Very good. So I think that brings us to the end of our time, and the information that we kind of had prepared ahead of time. We had a couple of questions that came in. We may not have time to do a deep dive into, but one of the questions that came through while we were talking, Paul, was if we were going to have a take-home message for people to deliver to their teams, what would you say that take-home message should be in terms of improving security? If there was one or two things people should do straight away, what would you want them sort of talking to their teams about?
For making sure that we're not sharing user accounts. It's super simple.
Yeah.
Making sure that for our important systems like Power Diary, that we have a unique password for that is not used anywhere else. That it's super important, and that we keep that we check our devices, we check the browser and our operating system. Are there any updates that should be applied, that can be applied, and do it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one that I would add on top of that, I agree with all those as well. I would add, turn on two-factor authentication for every system that you possibly have it available in. It is inconvenient, but it's nowhere near as inconvenient as having a major security issue. So turn it on for everything that you've got that possibility, and it's dramatically going to improve things. I think so. Look, if there's likely a few other questions or things that people haven't wanted to ask in the webinar itself, but if you do have anything, just shoot us through an email to our support team at support@powerdiary.com. If you have any questions, whether it's about something we do, or ideas, or a scenario you'd like, you'd ask us to want comment on or something, do let us know, and we're here to help and answer and assist in any way that we can. So I hope, just as we wrap up, that you found some of the things we talked about useful, or got some take homes that you can apply straight away, and get on that journey of making security something that is a day-to-day thing that you and your team are thinking about. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Damien.
Yeah.